Welcome back to another episode of Thinking That Matters. I'm Elizabeth Mahusay, your podcast host, and I am here with my friend and fellow Leadership McKinney classmate of 2025, the greatest class ever, DeAnna Stone. Thank you, by the way, for saying yes. Tell us a little bit about you, your background, and where you're, I say serving, because that's kind of how my mind thinks about it, where you're serving today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. A real honor to be here. If I look back, I started out as a child growing up in a military family. So I have a huge respect for the military and the service people that serve our country. And so very thankful for that. Fast forward through college and was a theater major, which I enjoyed and loved, learning life lessons through the theater stage. So it led me to being a drama director for many, many years, worked in nonprofit for really, truly 25 years. And then all four of my children are grown and out of the home, 3 married. And then I have 2 grandchildren and 1 on the way.
What?
Yes.
Wow.
And so that led me in 2024 to think, what does this next chapter look like? And being that I'm a theater major and I love telling stories, it led me to Chestnut Square Historical Village. I think that the impact that preservation has on a city and the community that it creates, to see those that served before us and the impact they made is an incredible part of a city. And so McKinney is very rich in that. And so I love telling the stories with Chestnut Square.
All right. So I have listeners all over the place, both in the U.S. and outside the U.S. So paint the picture, tell us the story, and let's make it short form, right? Sure. Of Chestnut Square, so they understand what you're referencing when you say Chestnut Square.
That is such a great question, and thank you for asking. Chestnut Square started in 1973. There was a home, the Delaney House, that's at the corner of Anthony and Chestnut, along with the cottage that was next door. They were under scrutiny and considering being torn down to put a courthouse in McKinney. The Delaney House was the first home to have running water and electricity in McKinney, so a very iconic property. Those homes range from 1850s to about 1920, and a group of women came together and saw the value and preservation of history. And so they led the first holiday tour of home and had 5 homes on the tour. They sold tickets and earned enough money to buy those properties. And so, yes, it's a beautiful story. I just think McKinney and the preservation and the importance of that was founded by a group of women. And then from there, it just grew. And you can see the impact that it's made on McKinney and the beautiful historical architecture that we have around the city. And so we still have our holiday tour of home every year in December. We'll be sharing our 52nd holiday tour of home.
Wow.
And when women invite people into their home, and we'll have up to 2,000 guests that will tour homes in McKinney. So to me, when you talk about McKinney community, there's nothing more intimate than inviting people into your home and be inspired. And so it's a beautiful thing that continues even to this day.
You know, I've heard this story before. Right. But I feel like I'm hearing it fresh on the podcast. So I'm appreciative of you walking them through that. But I just think about, a small group of women who created this idea of the holiday tour of homes and selling tickets to be able to purchase the property. And then how here you are 52 years later, and it's grown. It's not just the Delaney home. How many different homes are part of, or buildings maybe are part of Chestnut Square?
Absolutely. We have 9 historical buildings, including a 1800s beautiful chapel that we host events and weddings. The Ferris home, which was the first home built in McKinney, and it was moved to our property. We have also the Taylor Inn, which was where travelers and settlers would stop and stay at the 2-bit Taylor Inn to have breakfast, their laundry done, and stay overnight. And so we have also the Dixie store, and then the Johnson home, of course, sits in its original location as well. And then we have the Bevel house, which is used for receptions and a pavilion, and home to the #1 farmers market in Texas. So, yeah.
Yeah, the farmers market is incredible. Incredible. That is so cool. So I could guess what you're passionate about. But tell us, like, if you had to articulate what you're most passionate about, what is it?
I am most passionate about learning life lessons and being inspired by story. I think that being a theater teacher and inspiring youth over the years has been a huge passion of mine. But it's ultimately growing people to see outside, honestly, their limiting beliefs that hold them back from singing their best quality or dancing their best quality, and being aware of what those stories are that they create that may or may not be true, and then how we can navigate beyond that. And so truly looking at history, whether it be through a fictional story or through an authentic, genuine story, I think we can be inspired as people. So community, people, passion is where it speaks to me, no doubt.
I love how you connected, you said life lessons and be inspired by storytelling, and then specifically growing people to see outside their limiting beliefs. Because let's face it, a limiting belief that a person is dealing with is a story they have been telling themselves, oftentimes for years. So as a drama teacher, and being in that space in a variety of roles, what are some common stories that we're gonna first sit on the negative side of this that you have discerned, like a student, for example, was telling themselves that was holding them back, and how did you help them grow beyond that?
Absolutely. I think, most people can acknowledge that middle school years are a very challenging time. It happens to be like my sweet spot and my love, because that moment of drawing awareness to a child of when did you become aware of something that might hinder your ability to be creative, right? And they usually have some moment in time that reflects where they were aware of someone would have an opinion of them. And then they may create what that opinion of someone else may hold. One of the most common ones I hear and I come in contact with is the thought of, what is everyone thinking of me? And in a room full of middle schoolers, more than likely, everyone's thinking that. So who's the only one thinking of you? It's actually you. You're the only one thinking of yourself, because everybody else
thinking of themselves.
Yeah, they're all.
That's an excellent point.
Exactly. So when they become aware of that and they look around the room and they realize that, the question is, how does that help you show up differently in life tomorrow? If you know that really the reality is everybody is worried about what people think of them and nobody's really focused on you, how can you show up for others and see outside of yourself to make an impact on the room? Of course, it lends itself to a beautiful production in the final outcome, because we're bonded and we're connected and we have this relationship. But ultimately, it plays into how are you going to show up in life when you want to share something you're passionate with about to someone else? How does that show up for you? And so I think it's just really important to bring their attention to the fact that, oh, that's not true. Like, nobody's actually thinking of me. Oh, okay. Well, maybe that changes how I show up today, which I think is very impactful.
So you talk about middle school, and I so agree with that assessment. And yet I also think that people in every stage, every age, can drop into that story of, what do other people think about me? Whether it's social media, whether it's, because they've been so caught up in the lies that they tell themselves. So when we think of it from an adult standpoint, for the adult listening, how would you encourage them to, is it face the reality? Is that the way to say it? That not everyone's thinking about you?
Yeah.
How would you respond?
Absolutely. So even directing youth all the way up to adults, because I've directed community theater, and I have a very methodical process that I go through when we begin the journey. So when I got to the adults, I thought, do I need to change how I go about this? And the reality is, no, because we all have it. We all deal with it. And it all showed up at some point in our life that has hindered us in some way. And others have pushed forward through that. And so I think drawing awareness to the possibility and acknowledging we all have that and we can lay that down and show up in a way of a servant heart, not holding on to what we think the story is, but being present for the authentic story that's being created in the moment, rather than holding on to what potential that story is in our head that we're playing on a regular basis. And sometimes that takes great awareness. I recently had my lower lumbar spine. I had a bulging disc. And so I started thinking about all the little things that I did that were causing me pain, that I'm like, oh, that's something I've done my whole life. I never thought about how I drive or how I stand.
Yes.
And then if you play that forward and say, okay, what else am I doing in life? Whether it be thought or whether it be behavior that is really hindering me, I think it's an awareness. It's just being aware of the possibility.
You know, it's true too. I'm just thinking about you saying you started thinking about all the things that you do that cause pain. I have a good friend who he works at Shands Hospital in the Gainesville area. And one of his research topics is the neurological connection of pain and what we think about in our brain. Mm-hmm. And, because ultimately we get more of what we think about. And so when we're hyper aware, for example, of different pain points, then it can be all consuming. It's all we end up thinking about are the pain points for that. So it's interesting that you mentioned that about the bulging disc, and all of a sudden you're aware of things that you were never aware of before.
Right.
Because the pain is it's like a flashing light, but it's probably more like a flash of pain in your body. So you talked about helping, whether it's adults or middle schoolers. You said lay down. So have awareness, lay it down, and then be present in the moment as for the story that's unfolding in the moment. I like that. Was there anything of your methodology that I missed?
No, that was good.
Yeah, that's because I think for the adult that's listening, it's helpful to think of it in that way, but we first have to grab hold of what are we thinking about? What is holding us back? So as you've interacted in your space, especially regardless of the age, how do you help people have an awareness that they are bumping up against a limiting belief? Because without awareness, people will not lay it down. They have to be aware first. How have you helped people become aware?
So in the theater world, because we all come together for a certain period of time, we have a moment where we just kind of try to quiet our brain and think about what we're bringing into the space and what we're bringing into the room and how that's impacting how we're being present. Students deal with many things in the car ride on the way there, the stresses of life that they have. So I give space for them to share about what might be a challenge for them that they need to work through at the moment. One of my greatest challenges is if I'm directing and it's in the middle of school starting, right? Like school's about to start or school has started, right? Mm-hmm. And you've got 5th graders going into middle school or you've got 8th graders going into high school. Giving them time to just say, how was your day? Like, what did and you can see the anxiety and you can see all of that build up. But giving them a little bit of time to just talk about it and acknowledging it and being aware instead of pushing forward to my goal. I think that it's really important as people, we see people and meet them where they are in order to be able to create that authentic relationship that's going to grow. If I only see my goal and I fail to see where you are and where you're beginning, it's going to take me longer to get to where I want to grow those students. But if I can see them first and see your eyes, you seem like you're struggling, or you seem like there's a challenge, or you seem like you had a great thing happen today. Tell me about that. We have to control the time, of course, because we still have goals.
Right.
But if I take that 10 to 20 minutes to engage and see them first, the amount that they give me beyond is just incredible.
It can happen. The amount that you get can happen in a compressed amount of time because you've released the pressure and it opens their mind to be present.
That's exactly right.
And that's literally, as you were just describing, that see people, meet them where they are, give them that space. I think about so many leaders that I have coaching conversations with, and we talk about the one-to-ones that they need to have with their team members. Mm-hmm. And it's always about helping them to see it can't just be about your goal, where you want to go, what you want to see happen. Mm-hmm. It is about seeing people, like truly seeing them, meeting them there, and inviting them to share, right?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
You know, in terms of what's going on in their lives, and it opens up space for that. Okay, so I'm just curious, what even led you to want to go into drama?
That's a great question. Probably because I loved being the center of attention when I was younger.
Nothing wrong with that.
I'm just going to be down to,
nothing wrong with that.
Completely honest. But, you know, interestingly enough, I had to grow my art. I was always the loud one in the room. I was always the one that had many plates spinning at one time and would be the one to cause distraction and disruption in a classroom. No doubt. I was that student. And I learned how to take all of those things that kind of made me who I am and grow them into something that it takes a lot for people to do on a regular basis.
Yes.
Yet the details I can forget sometimes. And so that's just kind of what makes me who I am. And then I loved the art. I felt like it grew me as a person just by learning through other people's story and telling another person's story, and being able to live that out for a moment. I felt like it drew compassion from me. It drew empathy. It helped me understand whatever story I was telling, because we become part of that. So it was something that I always wanted to be a theater teacher, though. I never wanted the stage. I really did want to do for other students what I felt like theater did for me. And so that was really, truly always the goal.
You know, I've had multiple people in this seat here that are have either a theater background or currently part of theater. And I have heard the exact same two words from every single one of you, which is the development of compassion and empathy as a result of being part of the telling of a story, right? Because as an actor, you are communicating or sharing a story. And I think there's so much value to that. And I also think too about oftentimes the phrase that says walk a mile in that person's shoes. I'm not going to say it. What do you, from your perspective, take that phrase and draw it into the conversation that we're having right now about storytelling and compassion and empathy for others?
Absolutely. I think it's from looking at a situation from all different perspectives, and being able to see a story and recognize whatever story you're hearing, there are 4 or 5 different other views of that story. And so to be able to, for lack of a better word, float up from the conversation and see all the possibilities of the conversation or the story, I think is so important, because whatever story you're hearing or whatever is being shared with you, you're getting one perception. But in theater, you have to break down all the different perceptions of that story. So it helps you realize, oh, I'm hearing one perspective, but there may be other perspectives that I'm missing. So making sure that you hear it from all sides so that you can make a true decision or a true impactful moment for someone based on what you're hearing at the time. And so I think that's why, you know, walk a mile in someone's shoes. There may be 5 people in that story, and you might need to see it from all 5 people before a decision is made. And I think that's really impactful, because sometimes we immediately jump to what we're comfortable with or who speaks our language, and we may not necessarily float around and visit all topics, which I think theater does, because you're forced to do that. You're forced to look at the story from all different sides. Now, the beauty is, you know, the outcome of the story. And so that helps in that process, but it also helps to just sit back and sit in the moment of unfolding that story for a period of time.
Man, this is why I'm glad I asked you, because you bring such a perspective to that phrase. So, because I'm thinking most people, I think when they think walk a mile in that person's shoes, they think a one-to-one, right? A single person, I'm going to walk in their shoes. But to your point, they may have someone beside them. They may have someone in front of them. They may have people behind them. They may have people that are no longer living that impacted them. because I think about them. So you said 4 or 5 different views. I just find that very interesting because it was walk a mile in like a person's shoes, not 4 or 5 people.
Right.
But it reminds us that we're all impacted multidimensionally by those with whom we engage or have engaged in life. I like how you also said float up from the conversation and appreciate the differences of perspective. So I'm curious, as you were raising your children, how did you cultivate that even among your own children?
That's a really good question. I think that parents are tasked with the goal of recognizing they also come with a perspective to parenting, right? So your worldview of how, right? Like you have your worldview of what parenting looked like being raised, watching other children being raised. So you have a perspective from many different angles, and then filtering through that, what's the best option to use, and keeping a space of freedom for communication with your children is just so incredibly important. And those relationships, I used to tell the kids that I already know you have these stories of limiting beliefs in your head. I don't want to add to that, right? So trying to help them see outside of themselves, see a bigger picture, see other perspectives, and allowing them freedom to share what that perspective is so incredibly important. So I think it just was communication and for children, and they all communicate very differently. And learning that, what that looks like. My girls are an open book and we can talk for hours. My boys, not so much. But I had to learn to appreciate their form of communication. And then when they were ready, I wanted to be present wherever I was. I wanted to be present for that moment so that I can engage with them and create that, like I said, safe space for them to share whatever it is that they're dealing with, and control my own limiting beliefs of what I think they might be thinking, because sometimes you have to just allow them to share when they're ready.
That's hard. But I'm appreciating the fact that you were saying that all parents, and I think it would be safe to say that in any, when I say formal relationship, like a parent to a child, a spouse to another spouse, a daughter to a mother, well, that's parenting, but us as kids that we all bring a worldview to how we approach that, what our expectations are. And you were saying keeping space for communication, trying to control like what we think and what we expect or what we perceive to go, that might not be true. That might not be true. And also too, for it to be on, it's not in our terms. Like you mentioned about being patient with the timing of it.
Yes. Right. And I think at the end of the day, fear drives a lot of our decisions. And, once again, whatever that fear is, you need to decide, is that a true fear that I need to be concerned about? Or is this something that I have created that may or may not even be the case? And that takes discipline to not be reactive on that initial fear, but to give yourself time to think and work through it is incredibly important.
Yeah, I think this self-awareness. So it's interesting that you say that, because to assess whether a fear is worthy of addressing, or we make note and we observe, right? We continue to observe. I think it's people getting to that place of self-awareness that what is happening inside of me? What is this emotion? And being able, in this case, to label it as I'm fearful. And then being able to really have some inner dialogue of, okay, what has me being fearful? And what would be underneath that? Like, so but first and foremost, we have to even acknowledge that we do have fear. And then we are more likely to be able to deal with it in a more appropriate manner where our children are concerned. It just reminds me that, there's so much complexity in in the relationships that we have. At the same time, I think about what you said to begin with. You're passionate about life lessons and being inspired by storytelling, helping to grow people to see outside of their limiting beliefs. That one of the ways we can control the inner dialogue is awareness of others' stories, taking time to ask about another person's story.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's why I love this podcast so much, because I get to hear about the stories of other people. And there is so much inspiration to that. There's so much like, wow, that is such a great perspective. Like I'm just sitting here going, wait, you're telling, anyway, I'm having my own self-discovery moment right now. So tell me, in your years, so you've raised children, you've had, a vibrant career in this space. How has faith played a role in your personal and professional development?
That's a great question. I was fortunate to grow up in a home that honored Christ in their life. And it was a huge blessing to be able to see the impact of having faith and spirituality. And it has definitely shaped how I show up for people, because I think there's a much bigger purpose than just what's going on with me at the time. And so that, along with this kind of world of learning life lessons through the stage where you set up, frankly, situations to learn through, it plays an impact on how you face every day-to-day life, and how you show up for people. Because there are a lot of things that I think we can get worked up over, or we can have a bad day, and to be able to step away from that and realize that really moment in time is not really my purpose, but it's a much bigger one than that. And so looking at life through the lens of opportunity, to be a good reflection of what that spirituality looks like and how I can show up for you without being self-centered or self-focused, is something that I think our world struggles with social media and the busyness of life, and certainly goals that we're pressing forward to accomplish. All of those are great things. I just think that it's so important to see people before you knock everybody down to get to your goal. You know what I mean? Like, there's just a real value in seeing people and reflecting that faith so that it draws a deeper purpose.
Life through the lens of opportunity. Just tell me more about that. I want to insert, but sure. I want to hear what you have to say, because I think it's a very powerful phrase. I think it can mean different things for different people. So in the context of faith, life through the lens of opportunity, tell me more.
I think that when you have dealt with grief, or you've dealt with sadness, or you've dealt with challenges, you immediately have an opportunity to decide how you frame that. That is not to discount the sadness or the grief. I certainly can understand what it means to live through that. But what I can tell you is to recognize that there's a bigger purpose beyond that one moment in time. And there is opportunity for you to use that to help shape someone else, to help encourage someone else, to be there for someone else. And you may not know it at that moment in time, but through faith and through trust, you know that that opportunity will present itself at some point, and you will get to use that to hopefully pay it forward for someone else. And so that's the opportunity.
Yes, that is so true. Well, and I mean, there's scripture to back that up as well. You will be comforted that you can then in turn be a comfort to others. I believe it's 2 Corinthians 1, if I'm not mistaken, but that there's so much opportunity in that. You know, I remember when, you talked about in grief, or I remember when my dad died, and not that never, I have to be careful with that. But when that happened, it marked me so much that I was much more hyper aware of how I responded to people when they were dealing with death in their life, because that was an opportunity, right? Like, what I learned was an opportunity actually to learn. I mean, my dad's death was an opportunity to learn. And then what do I do with that learning, right? And how you show up. I just think that's so incredibly powerful. And then you also added to that, which I think I just don't want to skip, that it's taking advantage of the opportunity apart from self-centeredness and self-focus. and to really truly be others focused where that's concerned. And that's interesting. So in theater, how do you believe theater or drama, storytelling helps others to cultivate an others focused mindset?
Yes, that's a really good, there's a whole series that we work on of not just articulating your dialogue from the script, but being able to release the memorization of your dialogue and just listen and be present with your scene partner to be prepared to respond, but not be planning your preparation in response. And having the ability to train that and say, fully be present and listen and trust that their line will lead you to your next line without it having to be memorized is a life skill, right? I mean, being fully present with someone and listening to what they have to say without planning your preparation of speech next is a gift. And people know if you're listening. And so teaching them, yes, you need to memorize your line, but at the end of the day, you want to forget it when you walk on the stage and know and trust that you are going to be present. And through that relationship, through that moment, you will carry out what is that next step. And there's many performers that will say, I completely forgot whatever line I was supposed to say, but it just naturally came to them because they were present in the moment and they released it. And so I think that that is one way that you set up these life learning lessons, right?
Yes.
Like, you know, truly listening and being present without fear of what people think of me, without fear of, will I remember my line? Am I prepared enough? But just releasing that and letting it happen. But you have to have a space that allows mistake to do that. So it's important.
I think that is really important. Oh my goodness. I'm telling you what she just said. Just listen to me. This is where you hit the back 30 seconds or twice and you listen to that whole thing again, because whether you're on a stage or we're in a conversation like this, I think so often people are too busy thinking about how they're going to respond that they completely miss the presence needed for the person to actually feel heard. And it is a life skill. It's so powerful though. And listen, I am chief offender. Like in my younger years, I was very much about how I show up and I want to have it all together and I want to speak well and like all the things. And I would fall into that and really having to, kick that habit to the curb, and I have to be careful because otherwise I can easily fall, I can just drop right back into it because I care about what people think. Like I can drop into that. So I just think, oh man, that is so powerful. Such a needed skill to be developed.
So true. And I don't think we ever really master it. I think it's something that you continually work on because there may be one area of your life where it's easy, but there may be another area where it's a little bit more difficult for you. And
just ask our spouse.
Yeah. And, once again, being able to go into the theater world where I'm working with children and acknowledging every student has a worldview from what environment they come from and knowing that you need to respect and not assume anything about any one child, but get the opportunity to learn from them, know their manners, but you have to be present. And I can't be focused on just accomplishing a goal. But interestingly enough, when you just see the person and you create this environment of safety where you can make mistakes, it is amazing what will happen at the end result of that. And so it's so interesting that my passion is so much of theater and people and communication. And now I find myself telling a Chestnut Square historical story, but it's still impacting people. It's still taking story and being inspired by that to shape your future and see how you impact other people.
Oh, it's so true. Okay, we could talk for a lot longer. I'm just declaring that now. I'll have to have you back on at a future time, and we can explore even in more in depth some of these themes that have surfaced today. Before I ask you our closing question, tell the audience how they can learn about Chestnut Square, maybe get involved, how to get tickets for home, holiday home tour. So tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. You can go to our website, chestnutsquare.org, and be able to find access to all of our tours, from ghostly haunting tours that are coming up in October, which will be very exciting, to our holiday tour of home tickets. They go on sale in October 15th. We have the farmers market every Saturday Saturday from 8 to 12 in our beautiful, unique historical community. And really where you can support and honor local produce and local vendors, which I think is so important for a city, as well as if you want to get married or have an event, whether it be a birthday, celebration of life, or anything of that nature, you can come and we can be part of that. I think it's really important if you want to be part of a McKinney story and you want to create a community, regardless of what your heritage is, you have a heritage here in McKinney that you can adopt and be part of. And I think it's so important just to take a moment to come down and visit us, whether it's being a tour through the museum, whether it's a stroll through the farmer's market or your next event that you want to plan, we can help capture that for you.
I love it. And you'll see all of that information in the show notes. So just click on the show notes and you'll see links and how you can connect with DeAnna and Chestnut Square. So I ask every person who is on the show, because my passion is thinking, like helping people to cultivate thinking that matters. Why do you believe it's important for people to cultivate thinking that matters?
It is so incredibly important to cultivate thinking that matters, truly, because you will authentically be able to be present and hear what they have to say. You don't realize what you will miss when you are captured with fear or worries of what other people think. There's a world out there that's waiting to capture your attention, and you're just waiting to be inspired by people. But our ability to not be aware of what we're thinking hinders us from our growth. And so honestly, to be able to set down your fear of what that looks like, or afraid somebody's going to, there's just a world out there that's waiting for you. And I want you to be fully present for it when it happens. And it doesn't have to come through big things. It can come through small things and, the coffee shop line, or just, you never know what opportunity will be presented when you are out of your own head and you're just open to serving others.
Oh my goodness. So good. I have to just share this with you because of the space and the role that you're in. You when you said the coffee shop line, this is not a coffee shop story, but I was in line for Southwest Airlines. I was position 31 and there was a gentleman position 1. And of course I've noted that. I'm like, because not most people that's empty. He hears me hang up with Fred. I say, I love you. He says, you end every conversation that way, your marriage will last a really long time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, thank you. I believe that too. And I said, it sounds like you're someone who probably does the same thing. So we start this whole conversation. Next thing you know, I'm like, I know you. Like, you are so familiar. And he looked at me and he goes, it's called TV. And at first I wasn't getting it. And I said, so I looked at him, he probably saw my inquisitive look. And he said, did you ever watch the Netflix series, The Resident? I was like, that's it. I'm like, he would choose the one Netflix show that I did watch. Glenn Morshower was in position A1.
Nice.
And we start this whole conversation about marriage and about how his anniversary is the same day as our anniversary. They're just a few years ahead of us. I end up sitting in the same row with him on the flight. But to your point, that being present in the moment, it was the coolest thing. So anyway, and he exhibited so many things that you were talking about right here, because he's been in acting, 50 years? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so I love that connection that you made. So I want to encourage everyone that has listened to this episode, whether you go and join a community theater or you put your children in theater, or you just take the time to cultivate thinking that matters, where you can be authentically present and in the moment to connect with people. What we know, and I hear in what you've said too, is that when you cultivate thinking that matters, you can show up authentically. You can have conversations that truly matter, and that you'll have a lens of opportunity to impact people in ways that you may have never thought possible. So go out today and cultivate thinking that matters.